What's up, everybody? How you doing? Mike Virginia here with the Palazzo Podcast. Joining me today, Tyler London of Backpick Fantasy. Tyler, what's up, man?
Oh, thanks for having me, Mike. This is my second podcast of the year live stream, so I'm really excited to get on here, really talk about all the moves to make, some ads to make, and yeah, really excited. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, dude, absolutely. For those of you guys who don't know, I actually am new to the fantasy baseball scene. So, in terms of providing content and things like that, I actually was interacting with Tyler for quite a while before I started getting into writing and doing pods with Govier and really jumping on here on the Palazzo Podcast. So, Tyler's a really good dude. Love interacting with him. If you guys aren't following him on Twitter, aka X, make sure you guys are doing that on Twitter or X Backpick Fantasy. Govier says you guys rule. What's up, Gove? Feel free to jump in, man, if you want to talk some baseball. Week 20 preview is here. Tyler, can you believe that we are already that far into the fantasy baseball season, or just baseball in general?
Yeah, man, it's a grind, fantasy baseball. Like I was thinking to myself yesterday, all right, we got 2 more months, and just waking up every day and really keeping track of things like it is a lot to keep up with it, but it's really fun and it's really a grind. So like, football, you got 16 games a year. We have 162 games to manage. And I just feel like there's so much more content out now. So it's easier to really stay in the loop and find, what the next moves are and everything. So, yeah, no, it's exciting. And, I think at this point in the year too, it's at that point where those really like players in your head that you have the idea from the big name, there's only 2 months left. So sometimes you have to cut ties with some of those bigger names and really look at who has the good expected stats, who's hot right now. It's like a great time to stream bats, stream pitchers, and really set yourself up for the end of the roto push or a head-to-head matchup. So yeah, it's about that time of year in August where like, well, people will ask me, do I drop so-and-so big name? And it's kind of too early in the year to make that decision. But I think now is the time where you really have to make those moves. Like you might have to drop underperforming pitcher and pick up a Walker Buehler and stash on your IL and just hope that he hits fire. Or like a guy like Oviedo on the Pirates, like his numbers don't pop out, but he's hot right now. He's had 3 great starts in a row. He goes 6-7 innings. And that's like not a player you're going to be stoked to pick up on the first 2 months. But at this point, I think we're really at that juncture where you have to, especially like in a redraft, cut ties and just really kind of gamble a little bit and risk it if you're not like comfortably sitting in first. So I think it's that time of year where you really have to take a step back and be honest with your team.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well said. And for those of you guys who are watching now, the chat is open. So this is part of the show here. If you have questions for myself or Tyler, feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll get them answered for you. Yeah, I totally agree with you, man. I think it's one of those times too in the season where a lot of guys, we talked about it on the show on Friday, that a lot of guys start getting into fantasy football mode. Some guys are and gals are starting to lose patience with their teams, whatever it may be. So it's a grind when you have this many games going on, and that's part of the reason why I love fantasy baseball so much. I don't know about you, but it's part of the reason why I like the day-to-day moves, editing your lineup, figuring out who's hot, who's not, who am I dropping, all that good stuff. So, Tyler, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself? Where can people find your work, and that kind of thing?
Yeah. So, a little bit about myself. I'm, just a baseball fiend, I guess. I grew up, really loving the Dodgers. I'm a 90s kid. So baseball, like, in the McGuire Sosa era really just like turned me on to the game and I grew up playing. So, yeah. And then fantasy sports, I've always done it. Like, I think I've been in fantasy sports, since like the 8th grade and have a lot of really long time, leagues. And then last year, me and my buddy Garrett, who, we play in a home roto league, we just sort of were like, the Yahoo chats couldn't really get as much good information. I mean, they're pretty funny and fun, but we were like, hey, let's check out Twitter because, a lot of people are on Twitter. So we started, this handle Backpick Fantasy together, and we were just posting like every single day. And, with the engagement on Twitter and just the amount of heads that really like crave that content, and it's very niche, we developed a bit of a following. And, this year I started writing for Sports Ethos. So it's www.sportsethos.com. We have a great team, about 15 writers, where we're, coming out with a hot article every single day. So there's about 4 or 5 ads, some good pitcher streams in there or hot bats. And then, the Backpick Fantasy account, we sort of label it as a hot ad daily fantasy account, not DFS, but really trying to look at who's hot right now or who are the players that are right on the cut line that you might want to drop, and which players that are like rising percentage that you have to get in on before it's too late. So like someone like Steven Matz, I know in a lot of like industry leagues and stuff, he's very highly rostered, but a lot of our content is geared towards the masses, people that play on, Yahoo, ESPN or Fantrax with friends and stuff like that. Cause, a lot of those guys are still available. I think Matz is under 40% rostered, and he's been one of the hotter pitchers in the game right now. So really trying to push like those players and just help people win leagues and, integrate some expected stats into it just to kind of spread the knowledge. And, I've learned a lot from connecting with people that have been in the industry for a while. Now that I'm sort of out there doing podcasts and stuff and, really learning the game. So yeah, follow us on Backpick Fantasy. We're posting all day, every day. And sort of almost like a chat room because we have a lot of engagement with our followers and stuff. And yeah, Mike, you've really hit the scene really hard this year. Your account is very similar to ours where it seems like you're watching ball throughout the day, tweeting your thoughts and stuff like that. And, I think that's something the industry needs, just, your originality, what your takes are and stuff like that. So yeah, glad that you're out there. Seeing you post keeps us inspired to keep going.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And likewise, I really, appreciate engaging with you too. And hell, I've learned a lot from you as well, just from over the years from following you. So great account. If you're not following Tyler, make sure you're doing so over at Backpick Fantasy. So without further ado, we got some questions in the chat here already. Tyler hitting us up. So let's see. Ooh, shot at Gove. Tampa imploding versus Govier's Tigers right now, bringing Adam early, and he gets shelled, and their massive lead is down to 2. Embarrassing baseball. Man, I'm glad Govier's not here, Chad. Charles says, lost Joe Ryan, Jazz Chisholm, and Rodon, but still won the week. Locked up the 1 seed. Thoughts on Rodon? Plus, if you have a bye in the playoffs, is Bueller worth the risk? Tyler, really quickly, what are you doing with Rodon? Are you adding him? Are you keeping him, dropping him, trading him? What?
If I have Rodon at this point, I think I'd bench him. I think he's so talented where, that injury came into play earlier in the year and he's back now. And he was, being pushed as an ace in fantasy circles preseason. So due to his injury and him sort of still trying to figure it out, I would honestly put on my bench and try to hold for a couple weeks. That being said, if you're fighting for playoffs in a head-to-head league and you really need to have about 8-9 pitchers to go for like wins, Ks on a weekly matchup, and you just can't trust his ratios, he's one of those players maybe in a 10-team league that I could see dropping if there's a good replacement value on the wire. So, it all depends on team context. In a deeper league, I think like he's a pitcher, that can go deep into games and rack up a lot of strikeouts. His strikeouts have kind of been there. So he's someone that I would hold if I can manage it. But he's one of those players like talking about earlier, you have to be honest with yourself and say, hey, like if I lose this next matchup and get a 2-8 and my ERA and whip is blown, like his replicated stats lately have not been good. So that's one of those risks. Bueller, I tweeted on him the other day. So he's expected back in September. There was some like concern that he might be used, as a swingman before the playoffs to sort of ramp him up. But like the Dodgers really like getting their guys like Kershaw, Bueller worked up to 5-6 innings by the last week of the season. So in the playoffs, they can go a full amount. So I don't think Bueller has that much upside for wins or quality starts, but he does have ace upside per inning. So especially like in a roto league, I think he's a strong stash right now because I really think he could go out there and have a sub-3 ERA and, a sub 1.1 whip. And even in a head-to-head, it's one of those scenarios for me where if you have an open IL spot and have an add to burn, there's really no reason not to add him because he's so cheap. It's sort of a lottery ticket. Because, if he gets the innings, those last couple of weeks in fantasy playoffs, he could go 6 innings, strike out 9 guys. But it's just like tough because I don't think he's going to be ramped up to 5-6 innings until the, latter 2 weeks of September. But, that's when it matters. And if you're at that point in the season and you see Walker Buehler is going to start and he's on the wire, you're going to add him and someone's going to add him before then. So I think now's the time to get in. Yeah, he's like a must roster stash for me right now, especially if you have like a Story coming off IL. He's a great guy to just throw on your IL and then add someone else for his spot.
Yeah, totally agree with that take, and well said. Charles, to answer your question in short for me, like Tyler had mentioned, if you play in a shallower format, I'm fine cutting Rodon so long as you have the replacement of equal value for him, I guess. In a shallower league, you could probably find that on the wire. But he did leave today with something wrong with his leg. I did not dive too much into that, but just keep that in mind. In terms of Bueller, yeah, I mean, like Tyler had mentioned, he's an IL stash for me right now. Who knows how long they'll go with him in terms of his starts, and they'll probably only keep his innings to a short amount and when he first comes back. But yeah, we've seen the talent before. He's a stud ace. So, and it's clear the Dodgers need him. I don't think the Dodgers were planning on being this good after losing Trey Turner. And obviously some of their pitchers as well. So a lot of young guys in that rotation. They're going to need a veteran like Bueller. So great question, Charles. Hope that helps.
Yeah, and real quick, yeah, I just saw the update on hamstring tightness. So I mean, if he's going to hit IL, it might be worth it to stash him on it and wait a couple days. But that even gives more credence to a potential drop in like a 10-teamer, because it's like, how long do you want to roster a guy with a 6 ERA?
Right.
Yeah.
Our next question comes from Stoyanowski. I don't know. He asks, what do you think of Davis Schneider's recent bout? So for those of you guys who don't know, Davis Schneider is the second baseman, or he plays second in Yahoo, at least for me in my league, for the Toronto Blue Jays. He went 3 for 4 today with a home run and 4 RBIs. He's only got 3 games under his belt, but he is 8 for 12 since being called up with 2 home runs and 5 RBIs. So, to be honest, I don't really know if I have a lot of interest in him yet. I probably need to see a little bit more. I haven't really heard a whole lot about him prior to these 3 games. So, one things I'll tell you on here, whoever you are, Stoyanowski, is I don't like to BS anybody. I don't know enough about him to have an opinion, but if you play in a really, really deep format, like any player that we talk about on here, he might be somebody to stream or ride the wave with. So, Tyler, I don't know if you had any thoughts on him.
Yeah, so Snyder hit third today. So a lot of what I like to do on my account is like look at lineup context. So like he's hitting third for the Blue Jays. If he's going to start again and play semi regularly, especially with Bichette's out right now, so that middle infield has a little more runway. He's someone to look at. In the minor leagues, he hit 253 with 59 home runs and 1,332 at bats. So, that's a little bit more than a 20 home run pace, and he had 33 steals. So, if you can replicate some of those minor numbers, he has a bit of pop and a bit of speed, and probably a little bit more average upside than say a Zach Gelof. Even though Gelof, I mean, I think he's a 2020 guy next year. So it's one of those ride the wave situations. If he's playing and you're in a deeper league, like a fan track style league with middle infielder or something like that. Yeah, he's a why not add. I mean, he's hitting third for the Blue Jays, and he's just a guy. It's like if you add him, you keep him until there's a reason not to. Right. And second base is pretty shallow this year, so if you missed out on like an Albies type player, you might be running the wire all year. Because I always have people asking, should I pick up Massey or those type of second basemen, sort of like lower end. So Schneider, yeah, I like the lineup context. Yeah, he's only 24 years old, so there's upside there too.
Yeah, absolutely, and totally agree with that take. I don't have a whole lot to say about David Schneider, but again, if he's hitting like this and he's hitting third, I don't see why not adding him. The only thing I have some reservations about is what happens to him when Bo Bichette comes back, which who knows? I mean, the Blue Jays did say they were going to be careful with him and his knee, so this could just be a kind of precautionary IL stint, if you will. So who knows if they send him back down? But if he's hitting like this and he continues to hit until Bo gets back, they're going to have to find a spot for him in the lineup. So, all right. So keep the questions coming, guys. I do want to dive into Week 20. We're already 15 minutes into the show, but I do want to talk about some guys that Tyler and I like for some waiver wire pickups. Tyler, you okay with me starting?
Yeah, go for it.
Cool, man. I am going to go. My first one that I like this week is James Outman. So, for those of you guys who have been following me for a while, I was comparing Outman and Josh Lowe for a while. That Josh Lowe is a better ad. He's available. Stop sleeping on him. Yada yada. Outman and Lowe have both fallen off recently. But Outman is starting to get back up into the good graces of fantasy managers. So, Right now, currently, as I wrote my waiver wire article this morning, he was only 49% rostered in Yahoo leagues. But over the last month, he is hitting 328 with 14 runs scored, 2 home runs, 9 RBIs, and 4 stolen bases. So that's pretty damn good. And he does get the number one hitter matchup this week. He's got one game at San Diego, which is tomorrow. He's got 2 at Arizona and then 4 at home versus Colorado. So for me, he is the number one waiver ad this week. If you have outfield issues or you need somebody to replace a guy like Taylor Ward, Mike Trout, whatever it may be, I like James Outman a lot this week, and I would go out and get him. We've seen this happen with him before. He's crushed it. He fell off. Now he's adjusting back and getting back into the fantasy circle here. So, Tyler, any thoughts on James Outman? And then I want you to give me your number one waiver move of the week.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, Outman. I'm a hardcore Dodgers fan, and have always been excited for Outman. I think he was like a 25, 26-year-old rookie this year because Cody Bellinger really had him blocked, and I think that's part of the big reason they were fine letting Bellinger go.
Yep.
Bellinger's defense in center field was amazing for so many years, but they sort of soured on him. And Outman, true 5 cat upside. Like he's a guy that I think next year could be pushed into easily the top 140 picks and stuff like that. Anytime someone's offering 5 cat production, like if he started the year off, like he had that 5 cat stretch in the beginning of the year and he was like must roster all formats type player, and he's going through that stretch again. So I don't really see why you wouldn't add him. He's on the Dodgers. The Dodgers score a bunch of runs. And he can pitch in some steals. So yeah, Outman's a great player. He definitely has like 100 run, 30 home run, 100 RBI upside. And I think, he could hit over 260. And I really think in the future, like he's going to be a fantasy stud. And I think a lot of people haven't really leaned into picking up guys that might sit every now and then against lefties or righties, sort of like platoonish players in fantasy. But Outman's one of those guys, if you have the depth to slot someone else there in the outfield on the days that he might randomly sit against some lefties, it's worth it because his per game as an asset is amazing. And Roberts is going to throw him in there in good circumstances. So I know a lot of people will be like, oh, Kevin Cash, David Roberts, don't know how to manage, but they're putting guys in good matchups. That's why like Josh Lowe is so successful in my opinion, because he's getting in there the right matchups. I mean, obviously for fantasy, you want the counting stats. So if the guy plays every day, that's going to be better. But, someone like Outman, like I really trust he's going to be put in slots where, he's going to be utilized well. I think my top ad right now would probably be Mikey Garcia. I know in a lot of really competitive leagues, he's really scooped up already, but he actually has some sneaky pop too. Like he plays in Kaufman, so there's not a lot of home runs. I think he only has 4 home runs, but he has 17 steals now and 290 at bats. He got 2 more yesterday, and he's been hitting over 300 for a while. And yeah, I think average in roto and head-to-head cat leagues is a stat that people don't put too much weight into in terms of like I'm going to stream this guy to raise my average because you're putting up so many at bats per week, and it's hard to really like fix your average. But he's still offering 4 category production, and I think people a lot of the time don't look at players that aren't hitting home runs and realize, the other 4 cats are just weighted as the same as someone that is offering like the home run category production with not a good average. So like we love adding guys that can steal bases, hit, 30 home runs, get 80 RBIs, 80 runs. But sometimes we forget the guys that are hitting 300 that have like a 80 run, 70 RBI pace with a bunch of steals. And I think Michael is right in that category. His stat cast looks good. Like in Andres Jimenez, I would swap him out for Michael. He's feels great. Like when you add those players, you're like that are hanging on the wire, and then you finally hit add. Michael is one of those guys. Like I have him everywhere that he's available, and he has that third base shortstop eligibility. So you can slot him in and out of the lineup, even in like a standard league. He's a great bench asset. Late in the week if you need some steals, and he could be really helpful in head-to-head playoffs. He had like a stretch where he wasn't stealing a lot of bags because I think he like slammed 14 steals like when he starting in his first 2-3 months, and then sort of hasn't stole a lot recently. But yesterday he had 2, and once I saw that, I was like, okay, I'm comfortable calling him a must roster player, knowing that he's still trying to get some steals.
Yeah, absolutely. And we actually talked about Michael Garcia on Friday's show as well as a potential Bo Bichette replacement as well. Noting that what you just said, Tyler, is that he slots in at third and short. So he can offer you some speed, some average, a little bit of pop as well. So he's also part of my waiver wire ad. If you haven't subscribed to that, that's on Substack. Make sure you guys do that. He's batting leadoff, scoring runs. He's stealing bases. So he's a fine ad this week as well. Another guy that I like this week, and for those of you guys who don't know, I'm a huge Yuri Perez fan. So Yuri Perez is officially on his way back to the majors. Uh, it's it remains to be seen. Craig Mish wasn't really particularly clear on what was happening on Monday. He said he's returning to the rotation. He never said anything about starting. It's worth noting that the Marlins have a TBD listed as their starter for tomorrow. So I'm not really sure if he's starting tomorrow, if he's just returning to the big league club, and they're going to use him later this week. But for me, he is next to Outman. He's probably the number one ad for me as well. If you lose out on Outman, go get Yuri Perez. Um, to date, I'm still not sure why so many folks are out on him. He was one of the better pitchers in baseball before he got sent down. I realize the Marlins aren't a great hitting team, but at the same time, too, it's clear that he's the number two behind Sandy Alcantara. Probably make a case that he deserves to be number one. I mean, he gets a lot of Ks. His ERAs is phenomenal. He's only 20 years old. He's a stud. He's got electric stuff. So I've been holding on to him for a while now, and I'm glad that he's back. Tyler, do you have any shares of Yuri Perez?
So I only had one share in my home roto league, and we have an innings limit of 1,200 innings in that league. So I really wanted to bank all of his innings early on, even though he wasn't necessarily going quality start status every single game. But his per inning numbers are amazing. Yeah, I definitely think he's a must roster in all formats. Starting pitcher. He's a guy that you add and you figure it out later if his role shifts. Because in my opinion, he's the number one pitching prospect. I mean, I was really high on Gavin Williams too, but Yuri coming out and just straight shoving this year, and then him getting that rest because I think he only went like 90 innings before this year in his professional or amateur career. His StatCast is lit up. Like his whiff percentage is in the 89th percentile, fastball velo 95th percentile, and that expected batting average in the 85th percentile. And the higher you are in StatCast, that means like the better you are as a pitcher. Hitters are finding some barrels against him when they make contact, but his xERA, xWOBA is in the 74th percentile. So I really think he has that replicated success metrics that can really work. And yeah, man, I mean, you were on Twitter probably the most guy pushing the hold that I saw on him. And I think, if you held, you're going to have a lot of good, fruitful production the rest of the year, because if he was out on the wire, unless you like saw the news in the moment, he was going to be scooped up or someone was going to stash him. So yeah. And I think if you're in a dynasty league, he's a guy that's a keeper
For sure.
because I mean, I think he's one of the best young pitchers in the game. And I think, he's going to make a lot of people money in fantasy over the years.
Yeah, totally agree. And he's only 53% rostered even going into this morning. So that number will steadily climb come Monday morning. I believe he'll probably be in the 60s or the 70s. It remains to be seen how long they're going to let him pitch into games. There have been talks about potentially him being a long reliever, maybe only going 4 or 5 innings, because they still want to monitor his innings. But the Marlins are only a half game out. They're losing right now to the Rangers, but going into today, they're only a half game out of that third wild card spot. So, go add Yuri Perez. I promise you he's worth the ad, especially if they're going to let him go. Even if he goes 5 innings, shit, he struck out 7 guys in 3 1/3 in one of his most recent minor league starts. So I like him a lot for Ks, and I like him a lot moving forward. In Dynasty, you should already have never dropped him to begin with. Dynasty, he should have been rostered everywhere, but in redraft, go get Yuri. Tyler, another guy that you like going into next week.
Yeah, so I wrote a hot ad article for ethos.com today, and the player that I highlighted as the first guy on there was Max Kepler. Kepler has homered in 2 straight games, including a clutch go-ahead bomb 2 days ago. And yeah, the Twins have some sneaky fantasy value because I feel like they're one of those teams that people look at and they don't pop out as I want to get guys in that lineup, but they're in the thick of a playoff race. They're going to play their guys. Kepler now has 17 home runs and 278 at bats, 43 runs in 41 RBIs. So, he doesn't have any steals and he has a low average floor. However, I think he's been hitting above 280 the last month. And with Kepler, the whole thing with him is, we know he has 3-cat upside with the power and, ability to score runs, but the average was sort of the drawback for me. And in a lot of my builds, like I do try to roster, guys that are hitting above 270. And then for my power guys, I want them in that above 250 range. Like I'm a big fade Kyle Schwarber guy because, I don't want to lose average, to sacrifice to get those other 3 cats. Cause then kind of like cancels out like a 2-cat guy where Kepler, right, now he's hitting above 260 recently. Like he's in any 5 outfielder league, I think he's a must roster player, and he's definitely in standard league category. Like, I know some 10, 12 team leagues, if you only have 3 outfield spots and your utility has a really good player, he maybe not a guy to prioritize. But if you need like a power bat, I like him over like a Renfroe right now, maybe even a Moniak with Trout coming back soon. So yeah, I mean, he's on like a 34 home run, 80 RBI pace over, if you extrapolate to 560 at bats, if you multiple his at bats times 2, and he's playing a lot. So yeah, he's a really strong ad. And yeah, his stat cast is really good. His whiff percentage this year only is in the 75th percentile. He's hitting the ball hard. His average exit velocity is in the 82nd percentile. He doesn't walk a lot, but he's a slugger. Expected slugging is in the 83rd percentile, and he's barreling the ball up. His barrel percentage 76th percentile. So the underlying stats are there. Like he's a guy that if you like dig into him, you're like, okay, I really think he can replicate this the rest of the year. And yeah, I mean, his per game numbers have been amazing. So he's someone I'm running, for the wire for sure.
Yeah, that's a good call, and I'll have to dive in a little bit deeper too. Those are obviously some really good numbers over a 34 home run pace and sitting around your waiver wire. If you guys need power bats, I would go get them. So for those of you guys on the live stream, feel free to drop your questions in there, man. That's what we're here for. Tyler and I are here to take your questions. If you're talking about ad drops, waiver wire, talking about trades, dynasty, whatever it may be, put them in the live chat. We'll beam them up here on the screen, and we'll give you our thoughts. Moving forward here, Tyler, I want to give everybody at least one more player to add next week. We talked about Michael Garcia. I'll actually leave. We talked about it earlier pregame before we got on the show. I'm going to leave the starting pitcher for you on who to add because that's your boy. But I'm going to go next into my second and somebody I like as a 2-start pitcher stream next week, Cutter Crawford of the Boston Red Sox. So, Tyler, I know you were tweeting about him earlier on in the week as well as a potential ad, but Cutter Crawford has been phenomenal over the past 3 or 4 starts. He's actually putting together a really strong season, but he gets the Royals and then the Tigers. So couldn't ask for two better matchups, 2 of the 3 worst hitting teams in baseball. So if Cutter Crawford is available on your waiver wire, and with the current state of starting pitching, Tyler and I were talking about it prior to jumping on here. It's been really volatile over the whole course of a season. So Cutter Crawford, somebody you can stream next week against, again, two really struggling hitting teams. Even though the Royals have been pretty hot, they've been winning some games recently. I love Cutter Crawford as a 2-start pitcher stream, and he's available in a lot of leagues. He's only 27% owned in Yahoo, so he should be available on your waiver wire. I would go add him. His StatCast actually looks pretty good as well if you take a look. But over the last month, he's 2-1 with 23 Ks, a 2.18 ERA, and a .87 WHIP. So doesn't get much better than that. I know they're still toying with him going deep into games, but I love Cutter Crawford this week if you need a starting pitcher stream. Yeah. Tyler, any thoughts on him?
Yeah, 100% agree. Like I kind of have him right now in almost that Bailey O'Bear range where, he doesn't walk a lot of guys and he's going to have a safe floor because he has that control. His walk percentage is really good. And he gets guys to chase. So yeah, he's a must roster to me if you need an arm, like in your head-to-head formats. If you're not punting starters and you want 7-8 starters, he's a great sort of 6th through 8th starter in a standard league rotation. And I think they want to take the gloves off a little bit and hopefully he gets some quality starts leading forward. But players with that good whip is a really good indicator of like lack of blowups. And he's not going too deep into games, so they kind of are getting out of there before the third time through the lineup, sort of protecting his innings and stuff like that. And yeah, a basic name too, like Cutter Crawford has to be a baseball guy if you have Cutter in your name. So he's a fun
Which
player.
he's been throwing more, by the way. He's been throwing the cutter more.
Yeah.
So obviously good.
Yeah, and then I'll get into the pitcher that is a must roster for me, and probably my number one starting pitcher ad is Steven Matz, and he's one of those guys where the perception on him has always been he has that upside. On the Mets, he had a lot of games where he could go 6 innings and strike out 9, but has always been prone to blowups. Like, he's a guy that has had like a historical 4.3 ERA and an inflated whip, over 1.3. But he's clearly figured something out since he rejoined the rotation. He was thrown out of the pen. I was reading some stuff about his changeup, being really nasty right now with some adjustments. And he's one of those guys where, just because he's Steven Matz and you might think in years past he hasn't really put it all together, he's one of the hottest pitchers in baseball right now. And to me, you have to ride the wave. His last month, 1.65 ERA, 0.92 whip, 33 Ks in 32 innings, and 3 wins. And it's hard to find guys that are putting up ratios that are averaging more than a K per inning. And really, in a road or a head-to-head category league format, K rate's huge because people forget about, okay, if I have 8, 9 pitchers or 7 pitchers, let me look at the pitchers on the other side. And, if they have lower K rates than you, you're pretty much going to lock up that K category. And Matz is the full package right now. And we just got to ride the wave. I mean, I think he's due for some regression. I think he's going to have, a couple starts, maybe rest of the year where he gets knocked around a little bit. But I watched him throw yesterday and he's missing some bats, and really the strikeouts are there and the ratios are there. So, he's probably, in my opinion, like a top 35 pitcher rest of the season. And I think he'll have value the whole year. So he's someone that running to the wire for, and the spots that I missed him, I'm like, I wish I did it,
Yeah. And it's worth noting too, and I know it's going to seem like we're picking on Kansas City, and it's because we are. They suck. He gets the Royals next weekend in his next start. So again, another great matchup for Steven Matz if you need a pitcher. Like Tyler had mentioned, he's been playing pretty well recently, really over the last month. So he's definitely somebody to go grab, ride the wave. And again, facing Kansas City, you can't ask for a better matchup. So to recap real quick, our 3 guys, I'm going to go my 3 first, was James Outman, Yuri Perez, and Cutter Crawford. Tyler's guys were Michael Garcia, Max Kepler, I believe you said, and number 3 being Steven Matz. So if those guys are available, obviously team context is important. Go and get those guys. They can help you out next week and rest of the season moving forward. So for those of you guys who have questions in the live chat, we want to hear from you. Drop them in there. Let's beam them up. We'll get those questions answered. Chad says, don't fall for it. He had a schedule soft enough. I'd have a mid-3 ERA against what he faced. And every time the Royals get talked about as a great matchup is the time they melt a guy. It's happened consistently all year. Will happen again versus Mets. Well, Chad, they're still ranked a bottom 3 team in baseball in terms of all the hitting stats. So, like I said, and he's been hot and he's been playing well over really a little over a month now. So, you could do a lot worse. And these are guys that are going to be less than 50% rostered in leagues. So, you could definitely do a lot worse on the waiver wire. So, Steven Matz is a good ad, and we'll see how it goes against Kansas City. Charles, with another question, says, how would you guys rank Jazz Chisholm, Spencer Steer, and Lane Thomas the rest of the season? Tyler, you want to take that one?
Oh, that's a great question. I think Lane Thomas is one of those guys where his actual stats are, great. He played in Great American Ballpark over this weekend for the Nats. And, he was a guy that I was getting in all my lineups because I was kind of benching him over the last month because he's sort of cooled off a little bit. And, his expected stats aren't great. He strikes out a lot, but he had that big 4 steal game, I think, a couple weeks ago. And he's a true 5-cat guy. Due to Jazz's injuries concern, and, he had I think like a hamstring cramp yesterday, and he's already sort of being load managed even before that minor injury. I have to put Lane Thomas number 1 here rest of season right now. Per game, I definitely think Jazz Chisholm is a lot better. And if Jazz is going to play, 5-6 games a week, I definitely have him over Lane. But with Lane's hot stretch right now and just like my lack of trust in Jazz getting in the lineup. I think Lane Thomas could have a higher rank rest of season. Now, if you're asking me who would I rather have on my roster, if I could only have one of these three, it's going to be Jazz Chisholm, because I think the upside is 100% there. He has league winning talent. And it's just really hard, to trust him right now. If you were going to tell me Jazz was healthy today with that hamstring, I would definitely have him over Lane Thomas and Steer. But due to that injury right now and Lane Thomas going off, I would feel a little bit more safe with Lane Thomas. But definitely, upside wise, I would have Jazz Chisholm number one. And then I would have Steer third in this list. I really like Steer. He plays in Great American Ballpark. They're kind of mixing guys in and out of that lineup, so I don't think Steer can be, depended on for 6-7 week games. But he's great, and he's someone that I'd be targeting next year because he has that multi-position eligibility, because he's played some outfield, some first base, and some third base. So these are all really strong players. I'll kind of change my answer. I think Jazz Chisholm would still be number one for me because, he hasn't hit the IL yet, with this hamstring issue. So, I'm still assuming he's sort of day to day. He already has a home run since he came back. And yeah, I mean, Chisholm's pace could be, he could go 30-40. Like he's an amazing asset. And I know he's on your do not draft list, with sort of the Buxton type guys. So yeah, I get that, because I mean he's frail, he gets hurt all the time, so it's just hard, and Lane Thomas is like a top 30 player this year, so at a certain point we have to change our perception and say, screw the expected stats, this guy produces.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I don't think you could have said it any better. I agree with that take 100%. Right now, I'm going to take Lane Thomas number one just because he's healthy and he's been producing. I think clearly the biggest upside, the highest ceiling here is Jazz Chisholm. I don't think anybody's new to that idea, but at the same time, too, the guy can't stay healthy. And I know he exited yesterday with cramps, but at the same time, too, it's always something with him. He's got a lot of speed. He's a very exciting young player. But right now, if you'd ask me to pick rest of season, if you're asking me to pick one, it's definitely going to be Jazz Chisholm just based off of the upside alone. But if you're asking me to rank currently right now in terms of just overall production, I'm going to take the guy who's healthy, and it's going to be Lane Thomas, then Jazz Chisholm, and then Spencer Steer. So I think all these guys have value. So if you're looking to drop one of these guys, I would not recommend that. I would definitely hold on to all three of these guys. But if I had to rank them now, rest of season, hopefully, noting if Jazz's injury is not too bad, I'll go Jazz, Lane, and then Spencer Steer. So, Charles, appreciate the question, man. Real quick, diving next into our Week 20 preview here. I just want to go over the top 5 friendliest hitter matchups, and then also the weakest hitter matchups for next week. So the easiest, starting from the easiest from the top 5 here. The Dodgers are number 1, followed by Milwaukee, Boston, the Phillies, and then the Braves. So if you have any of those players on your team, that's looking pretty good to start the week. Those are the top 5 easiest hitter schedules. The hardest hitter matchups: the White Sox, the Orioles, the Guardians, the Angels, and the Diamondbacks. So like I mentioned last week on last week's show, just because these guys have the top 5 hardest hitter matchups, that does not mean I'm sitting here saying to bench any of your studs on these teams. Just keep in mind that they're going to have a tough road ahead. Again, some pitchers implode, even if they have tough matchups or easy matchups, whatever it may be. But these are some things to take into consideration when you're going into Week 20. We talked about it on Friday's show, that at this point in the season, this is what you kind of want to start looking at in terms of, hey, who are my guys facing throughout the week? Do they have a soft schedule, an easy schedule? Where are they playing at, et cetera, et cetera? So just keep that in mind. In terms of my top 5 starting pitcher streams next week, these are guys that are less than 60% owned in Yahoo leagues, and that can help you out next week if you need a starting pitcher. First, we already talked about him, Cutter Crawford. He gets the Royals at home and then the Tigers at home as well. So 2 really good starts. He should be owned in a lot more leagues. I'm surprised he's not. Surprisingly for me, in Yahoo, he's less than 60% owned, is Grayson Rodriguez. He gets a tough matchup at home versus the Astros, but then he goes to Seattle. So again, just off of the pure upside of Grayson Rodriguez, I like him as a 2-start pitcher stream next week. And really, he should be rostered moving forward. So he really shouldn't be in this column, but just my 2 cents on it, especially in 12-team or competitive formats. Third, Ryu, I can't pronounce his first name. Hyjin Ryu for Toronto. He gets the Guardians at Cleveland, and then he gets the Cubs at home. Fourth, Braxton Garrett, who's at Cincinnati versus the Yankees, and then Ranger Suarez, who gets Washington and Minnesota. So, Tyler, any interest in any of these guys for next week?
Yeah, like you mentioned, Cutter's 2 start is the guy I trust the most. Suarez, I like him. You know, he had that ridiculous stretch where he was closing some games and starting some games and offering like 5 cat production out of the pitcher, position. I think a couple years ago. So I've always like remembered that he has that upside if he can really get going. I just don't, trust his control so much. But if you're in a pitcher build where you want to just get as much volume as you can, and all those guys you mentioned, I think can rack up some counting stats. So but yeah, Cutter Crawford probably my number one lower owned guy, for the 2 starts right now.
Yeah, totally agree. And Ranger Suarez, again, if you play in a deep format, mind you, so he's somebody, again, pretty two decent matchups against Minnesota and Washington. So nothing that really scares me. I know they got some talented hitters in both those lineups. We already talked about Max Kepler, but Ranger Suarez is a guy, if you play like in 14 team plus leagues, who might be somebody who could be serviceable for you and eating some innings up for you. Yeah. So, Tyler, anybody that you want to talk about? I know we got about 20 minutes left in the show. Is there anybody that you want to talk about in terms of how your season's going? Any guys that you're excited about? Guys moving forward?
Yeah, I mean it's kind of random, but Johan Oviedo has really like exploded the last 3 starts. He went 7 innings against Detroit. I know it was Detroit, but he got a win on the first with a sub 1.2 WHIP and 1.29 ERA on that day. Then today he shoved against Milwaukee, 7 innings, 6 strikeouts, shutout with a 0.71 WHIP. And then dating back to the 26th against San Diego, he got a win there. So he's looking like he's going to have 3 wins in a row in his 3 starts. He's a guy that Pittsburgh is running out 6-7 innings in a deeper league. He's someone that I'd be looking to ride the wave. Statcast doesn't look good. I mean, he's probably overperforming, and I think there's going to be some regression coming. But anytime a pitcher for me has gone 3 times in a row 6 innings, with a WHIP under 1.2 and an ERA under 3, if you've played baseball or watched for a while, like you got to ride the hot hand. It's a real thing. And he's one of those guys. It could sound crazy to drop like a Rodon for someone like him, but if Rodon is going to be day to day and maybe missing his next start, guys like Matz, Oviedo are guys that's risky. It's like a gamble to give up like a sure asset kind of guy like Rodon. But, if you're really right on the cut line of making the playoffs and you're not even sure if a guy's going to go, or you can't trust him because, they're throwing up a 6 ERA, even a guy like Oviedo, with bad expected stats, like actual stats matter too. Like he's getting the job done. So he's the guy that I'm interested in. And I'll talk a little bit about, I did some second half redrafts, which I really like to do to just sort of like set my valuations for next year. And looking at players. And, I've learned in this modern fantasy game right now, especially in head-to-head formats, really leaning into drafting a lot of hitters early, first 6-7 rounds. I think going bats are huge. Like I took Albies and Arozarena on the 2-3 turn in a recent redraft. And, I know I've been talking about it on Twitter and, past podcasts, but Matty McLean, man, that guy is a stud right now. He's outperforming De La Cruz, recently, and he's a real 5-cat guy. I really think he can be like similar to a Bo Bichette when Bichette was stealing like 18-20 bags. So I would take McLean like maybe in the late 30s next year. It sounds kind of crazy, but he has that 5-cat production and he's hit on every single level. And, if I can get him in the 4th and 5th next year, that's where I'd really want to take him kind of high in the top 40. But I could really see his ADP getting pushed high next year. I could see a lot of analysts, looking back at sort of like the Corbin Carroll thing this year where, Dave, who was on the podcast with me earlier on the trade deadline in Joe's show was, mentioning, hey, these 5-cat guys like Corbin, there's a lot of like skepticism. Like, am I going to take, a first, second year player based on like Steele's upside? But we saw what Carroll has done. And, McLean doesn't have the speed that Carroll has. Like, Corbin Carroll is, probably a top 5 fantasy player for years. And I don't think McLean is, in that sort of area. But hey, I mean, this guy could hit 290 for years. He could hit 20 home runs, steal 15 bags, score 100 runs, and get 80, 90 RBIs. And I mean, he's a great asset. I mean, I still have guys like Seager higher than him at shortstop, but at cost, I would want McLean more than Bo Bichette. Like, I think Bichette next year is probably going to still be in the first and second round, but the reality is Bichette's not running as much, and he's an elite 4-cat contributor, and he's probably going to hit 320, 330. But I'd rather get an outfielder like a Luis Robert at the end of the first round or something, as opposed to a Bichette, and then wait till the 4th or 5th and try to lock down McLean. Because I think next year might be the last year that we can kind of get a discount on him. But second year blues is real too. Like Jonathan India, I think was a 5th overall pick, and he had that ballpark context and Great American Ballpark, and sort of has slowed down a little bit, and he sort of was in that 5-cat range. So of course, McLean's BABIP is really high right now. He's getting some luck, but playing in Great American Ballpark, I think cancels that out somewhat. And he's going to be a second-year player, so he could also improve. So yeah, McLean is like a guy I'm super excited about. I'm going to keep pushing him and hopefully get that ADP in a range, that's fair for him, because, like you said earlier, a lot of people aren't locked in as much anymore. Fantasy football starting, and, McLean has only been up, probably only going to get like a 60, 70% full season at bats this year. But per game, the guy's a beast, like true 5-cat contributor.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Good call. I was actually really high on him as well. Govia and I talked about him on a show right around when he got called up. So Govier is one actually who sold me, and I got him in a couple leagues as well, and I'm loving the production that I'm getting from him. I totally agree with you. 30s might be a little high for me, but and definitely a top 50 player for sure. And I have no problem with going out and reaching for him because, like you said, he does offer 5-category production. And again, if he's putting up similar numbers to Bo Bichette, and he's going to give me the stolen bases, Bichette is going to be the guy who's going to be drafted ahead of McLean, but I'll wait a couple rounds later and get Matty McLean and take the value there all day long, especially if he's going to get still hold multi-position eligibility too. So I love the call there. A guy that I am high on going into next season, and he was on my do not draft list this year, and he's probably now watched. And as soon as I say this, he's going to be somebody I'm going to be looking to add next year as well. And his value is going to go up, unfortunately. But I love Luis Robert. I think you and I were engaging with him. I actually traded Ellie De La Cruz straight up for him in one of my leagues, which I feel like I fleeced this guy for him because I sold Ellie at his highest and got a top 20 player rest away in Luis Robert. So 4-category contributor, actually really 5-category contributor because he's stealing bases now. But the biggest thing with him, and I think we've all known this for a while with Robert, is he just can't stay healthy. And this year is his first really good season where he's staying healthy and producing like we all thought he would. So he's probably going to be a late first rounder, early second rounder for me, depending on what your league format is and settings and all that good stuff and scoring. But I love Luis Robert. He's a guy that I'm really happy to have on one of my teams. He was on my do not draft list only because he's just never been shown to stay healthy. So knock on wood, I hope he's there for me come playoff time, but hopefully he can continue the production. So those of you guys in the live chat still with us here, please, we got about 10 minutes left. Please feel free to drop your questions in the live chat here. We'd love to hear from you guys. If you guys aren't following us already, make sure you follow us at the Palazzo Podcast on Twitter, Discord, and YouTube. Follow me, MKB Fantasy, on Twitter, now known as X, and obviously Tyler as well at Backpick Fantasy. Our Twitter handles are right on the screen there. Be sure to follow us for daily notes, questions, advice, whatever it may be. We interact a lot with folks on Twitter, so we're here to help you guys, even if it's outside of this stream today. Please make sure you guys follow us and continue to ask questions because that's what we're here to do, right, Tyler, is to help people.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's just like a really good community, and a lot of the followers and stuff really help me too, just bringing up players. And Mike and I are going to give our honest opinion on these type of players, and I think people value our accounts for that because we're going to give our takes, and the thing in fantasy sports is you want to be right, 60-65% of the time. And our accounts are really looking at like streamer slots, and sometimes you just got to take the risk and see if it pans out and then just move on. And I think that's something everyone can really lean into in fantasy is streaming, and then also platoon players. Like if you have the depth, like guys like Will Benson, James Outman are big in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so glad you brought that up too, because somebody just literally laid into me the other day when he asked me about a trade between David Bednar and Hassan Kim. And at the time, Kim was not where he's at now, so everyone was expecting maybe for him to kind of fall off. He was just starting his hot streak, so and the guy needed saves, so I said Bednar. He reminded me and said, "Oh, this is a terrible take," et cetera, et cetera. Sometimes that happens, and especially in this industry as well, guys produce and then they fall off, and you take the proven name in David Bednar. Maybe he'd get traded to a contender. He didn't, but I think that's one of the few things, especially in fantasy sports, that guys don't own when they're wrong. And I was wrong on a lot of guys this year and a lot of things, and there I was right about some things as well. So that's fantasy sports for you, though. So one thing you're always going to get from myself, and I'll speak for Tyler as well, is we'll own it. And again, sometimes we're right, sometimes we're wrong. But at the end of the day, they're still your teams. That's where we're here to help, to try to advise in the best of our abilities with the data that we currently have. So
yeah, and real quick before we get into this question,
yep.
yeah, I think in fantasy sports the goal is to win. So I'd rather gamble and really like try to hit all those league winning streams in the span that I can, rather than having a maybe more adverse risk approach where you might be good in third or fourth and have a really stable team, but you've got to really look at your roto categories or your head-to-head categories, and see where you need improvement. And a lot of these websites, platforms, in head-to-head formats, you don't have the accumulated stats for all your categories, like right there on the screen, like a roto when you go hit your standings. But on the, websites on the computer, you can still go in and look, where you are seasonal on those categories. So, if you need saves, you need saves. And, if you have backup bats, to replace a Kim, you got to do what you got to do, especially nowadays, less linear closers. Real quick, before we get into this question, Gregory Santos is out on bereavement right now for, the White Sox. So, closer monkey has Aaron Bummer as the number, one option right now to pick up, and closer monkeys, usually right. And, a lot of the updates on the apps too have Aaron Bummer as a saves, option. His ERA is over 5, so he could wreck you and give up 2 runs in the 9th. But yeah, in leagues where like they're really safe sharks right now, Bummer could be like a short term like stream, and hopefully he can rack up 1 or 2 saves and not ruin your ratios. So yeah, he's someone to look at.
Yeah, absolutely. Love the call. Gregory Santos is still the closer there, but he's on bereavement. So again, short-term option. Bummer could be a guy that you could use. Real quick, I'm going to get in this question here. Looking for a short J-Hook 703 says, looking for a short-term Marsh replacement. Harold Ramirez, Mark Hanna, Jake Myers, Dominic Canzone, Cade Marlowe, probably the most obvious options. Tyler, in a short-term Brandon Marsh replacement, I assume this is a deeper league here. If Marsh is somebody that you're starting on a regular basis, who do you like of this group?
Out of this group, I like Cade Marlowe. I mean, with Kelenic out, he has some runway. He's only, I think, starting against righties, but he has that speed and power combination, and I think he has like 2 home runs and 2 steals already in limited at bats. So he's shown that, like, he's a potential 2020 guy. I mean, that's really lofty. I don't know if Cade Marlowe will ever have 20 home runs and 20 RBIs, but Andrew, who's over at Sports Ethos, big prospect guy, really pushing Marlowe. And out of this group, I like Marlowe. I mean, Harold Ramirez is in a good lineup, but the Rays are going to Ray. You don't know how often he's going to be in there, even if it is a lefty. Like they might still sit him or something like that. So I kind of like Marlowe. I added Marlowe in a couple like 12 team and 10 team leagues where I'm really looking for steals, because at this point of the year, steals are hard to come by, off the wire. Like Willie Castro, I think, is out there. He's sort of having like a John Birdie type steals season right now. But yeah, Cade Marlowe. I mean, I don't know if Kepler's out there. I assume not, because he didn't mention it. I like Canzone too, after the trade, and, if he's getting regular at bats, I like him. But Cade Marlowe is sort of like a mystery box type player. Like you sort of know what you're going to get with Harold Ramirez and Mark Hanna. So I like the upside of Marlowe. I think he has the most like league winning talent out of this group due to his prospect pedigree and Kalanick, had that, what did he do? Kick over a water
Kick the
cooler.
water cooler. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And he was crying on the interview after. So yeah, Kalanick, obviously an exciting prospect, but I think Marlowe does a lot of the same things that he does. So yeah, I definitely like Cade out of this group. And yeah, Cade is someone that right when we're out of this thing, he's a player that I'm going to add in a little bit of a deeper league. I think it's a 16 teamer and he was dropped. So he's going to be a player that I'm going to add, right after this. I'm going to drop Mike Ford for Cade Marlowe and, a 16 team league, definitely deeper leagues. I think Marlowe's a guy that I really want to roster.
Yeah, totally agree with that take too. And again, a lot of these guys, it's worth noting, that are probably going to sit some days. I don't think they're regular full-time players. With Harold Ramirez, Canzone, Cade Marlowe, like you had mentioned, is going to sit sometimes. So they're all kind of lumped into that same category for me, maybe on a strong side platoon for a lot of these players. So, but definitely out of anybody in regards to a ceiling type player, it's definitely Cade Marlowe for me as well. It really depends on team context as well and where you're lacking in terms of your categories. Maybe Harold Ramirez, because he bats somewhat sometimes again in the upper third of that lineup for Tampa Bay. But I would also look at matchups here too, J Hook, and see who these guys are playing the next couple of weeks, the pitchers that they're playing. But for me, it's Cade Marlowe, and it's not particularly close either. I would say Harold Ramirez would be second for me here. But give Cade Marlowe a shot for a short-term replacement, but he probably has rest of season value as well, so long as Jared Kelenick's out. So thanks for the question. I appreciate it. That's an interesting one too. Much deeper league format question too. So I appreciate the question there, J Hook. We got about 4 minutes left. If you have more questions, please feel free to drop them in the live chat. We want to get to as many questions as we can. We're going to try to hold this to an hour. So Tyler and I both have commitments right after this show. But if you guys have questions, let's do some rapid fire real quick. We'll help you guys out. Drop them in the live chat. We're happy to beam them up on the screen and get them answered for you. Chad says Lambert is the closer while Santos is away. Lambert did get the save today. Said he looked dominant with the 15 pitch save. I did catch a little bit of that. I don't know if you have MLB TV, Tyler, but I did see Lambert pitch today. He looked pretty good. I think that's going to be a closer by committee while Santos is out to probably play the matchups. I don't know if I think Aaron Bummer pitched 2 days ago, if I'm not mistaken, or yesterday. So he may not have been available, but yeah, Chad, I like that in terms of Lambert and or Bummer could probably be some speculatives, kind of in the same category for me. But I would assume that those guys are probably going to be splitting some time while Santos is out. J Hook says, is there a landing spot for Mancini that would bring him into consideration for deep league rosters? For me, I'm going to take this one really quick, and then I'll let Tyler answer. For me, I don't have any interest in Trey Mancini. I would be shocked if somebody added him to start anywhere on somebody's team, unless an injury happened and they brought him in to kind of help fill that void. Worth noting too, he wasn't playing particularly well for the Cubs. Otherwise, they wouldn't have cut him. But I don't see him actually landing with anybody unless there's an injury happening somewhere. But if he does go with somebody, it's probably going to be somebody where he's going to be platooning and be on the long end of that platoon and probably only getting a couple starts a week. So, Tyler, any thoughts on Mancini real quick?
Yeah, I mean, Trey Mancini, great player back in the day on the Orioles. Great story coming back from cancer. Yeah, I mean, if he's like J Hook saying, Colorado, if he gets, he's not going to be on the Reds, but if he was in one of those ballparks, I think anyone getting regular bats in those type of settings are worth a look. But yeah, I think in terms of fantasy, Trey Mancini's washed. Like, he's not a player that I'm really looking for right now. Kind of know what you're going to get with him at this point in his career, and he hasn't really had a big season in a while. But he has that history. Like, we saw what some players bounce back this year, like a JD Martinez, but Martinez has been like way more productive in the last 5 years anyway. So yeah, Mancini's not a guy that I'm prioritizing, but I mean, hey, if you're in an 18 to 22 team league and he's getting regular at bats, it is what it is. And he's someone that you could slot in there. He has some, former fantasy pedigree, so it's not out of the question he could perform. But yeah, when I'm looking at the waiver wire between a guy like Cade Marlowe or Trey Mancini, I'm going to go with the young upside guy all day and sort of avoid old veterans that are sort of on the downtrend.
Well, you also take a guy who's currently on a team too, right? So, I mean,
Right.
Mancini's not playing with anybody. So I don't think he's somebody even worth stashing right now until, again, if you play in a really, really deep league and he gets added somewhere and you need a bat, maybe. But again, I don't think anybody's adding him to start. And if they are, it's because a big injury happened. So um, I know we're running short on time. Real quick, just wanted to recap here too. Make sure you're following myself and Tyler on Twitter, aka X, at MKB Fantasy for myself and at Backpick Fantasy for Tyler. We're always engaging. We're always on that space. We're here to help you guys. Make sure you're following the Palazzo Podcast YouTube channel, following us on Twitter, and then also get in the Discord. We got a lot of great shows coming next week. We'll do this again next week as well. Tyler, I'd love to have you on again. This was really fun, man.
Yeah.
Um, and
Yeah, we can make it, a semi-regular thing, just,
yeah,
on
man.
the weekends, especially too. I know, we're busy with work and kids and stuff like that, but yeah, Sunday afternoon is always a great time for fantasy, especially, as the ad cycle gets started over for the next week.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I appreciate all the questions. Make sure you're following us everywhere, and we will see you guys next week. Peace.